Hello everyone, welcome back to the Spring Boot GraphQL series. This is the video in the continuation of the first part. So we have already are continuing our Spring Boot GraphQL playlist, and in that first part we have covered the introduction and project setup. Okay, so in the project setup we included all the dependencies required, which were JPA, GraphQL, Web, Postgres, and Lombok. We have installed all the required software, that is IntelliJ IDEA Community and PostgreSQL, and we set up the application.yml configuration in our project. The database configuration is done. The GraphQL tool configuration is done. Okay. So in this video, we are going to cover, we are going to create a JPA entity, as well as we are going to see how we have to map that entity to GraphQL schema. So we will look into that. So let's get started. So to create a model or a JPA entity, so we have our base package, this dev.graphql.movie API. So right click on it, create a new package, name it as models. In this we'll create a new class. So we will name as movie. Okay, and we will annotate it with entity, right? Then we have to define the fields. So first field will be private integer ID. Okay, and this field we will annotate with ID. Now ID comes from jakarta.persistence, so this will be our primary key, and we will auto generate it. So we will annotate to auto generate, we need to use annotation generated value, and in the brackets strategy equal to generation type dot identity. The other fields that we will use is title of the movie. Okay, then we will have director of the movie. Then we will create another field, that is studio. Next field will be the integer release year, okay, when the movie got released. And finally, one of the most important thing, list of string. We will create a list of the cast in the movie. Okay, movie cast. Okay, so these are the things that we are going to create. And since this is a list, so we need to annotate it with element collection. So element collection will create another table. Okay, and it will map each element in the list to the ID. Okay, so if we include 4 elements, if the list of movie cast has 4 elements, then each element will be mapped to this integer ID. Okay, and we can rename the collection table. So since we want, we can create movie cast or simply movie cast. Okay, so this is the name of our table. Now we need setters, getters. So basically first we will use the data, then we will use getter from Lombok. All these are coming from Lombok. Then no args constructor, and finally all args constructor. So this much it is required for us to do, right? That's the Lombok we have already put in. Now next thing that we need to do is to create a repository corresponding to this. So we will create another package name as repositories, and in this we will create a interface. So we'll create an interface name as movie repository. Okay, and this will extend JPA repository, and the name of the entity is movie. The primary key is of the type integer. That's it. Okay, that much we have done. Now if we run our program, this table should get created. Okay, now currently the Lombok may be not showing currently, but just hopefully when we will run the movie API, this main application, the Lombok processing may be there. And let's see if there is any plugin for Lombok that we can install. Let's hope. So there is a plugin for Lombok. Let's install it. Okay, it's completely free. So just apply. Okay, and now if we come here, okay, now it's all the warnings are gone because we have installed the plugins. So just ensure that you also install your plugin in the IntelliJ IDEA community. And if you are using ultimate version, then it will be auto installed, and in Eclipse it is a bit complicated way to do. So if you are using that, you can follow the instructions on the official Lombok page. Okay, this is how it's done. Now let's run the application and see if our table gets created. All the things are good and working fine. So let's run the application, enable the Lombok processing. So our application is being run. Let's see. Okay, fine. Since we have included this thing show SQL equal true, so it is showing that this SQL query has been fired and a new table has been created, and one more table movie cast has been created, which has foreign key as movie ID and movie cast of type string. Okay, so to see that if it is actually created, to verify once, we can go to our Postgres. So we had created this movie DB. Just right click on it and just refresh it, and just go below in the tables. If you scroll down, you will see the both are here. So just right click on the table and then view edit data all rows. So yes, this table is created fine. And in the movie cast, if we do the same, then this table is created. Okay, so that much it is, and currently there is no data. So when we will create a method to insert the data later on, but now for now this much it is done. Now for us to query the data, or before to query or insert or do whatever using the GraphQL API, we need to create a GraphQL schema, so that we need GraphQL knows that what type of entities we are using and what needs to be done. Okay, it understands our Java code. Okay, because GraphQL is a query language and Java is another language. Okay, so both needs to be mapped up. So to map both, go to the resources folder, and here there is a GraphQL folder. Right click on it, create new file and name it schema.graphqls. Okay, just again see that you are typing, there is no typo error. It is schema.graphqls. Okay, and you can then once this file is created, now we need to create a schema. So to create a schema, let's go to the official GraphQL documentation. So here I've opened the official GraphQL documentation. Here you can see we have schemas and types. So if you go a bit below, there are various types, like character is one type, string is one type. Also this, when we put a exclamation mark after the type, it means that this field is a non-nullable and it is required. Okay, you cannot just leave that field. This type of field means if you put any field, custom field, or your these data types inside the brackets, it means it is an array. Then if you come down, so GraphQL has various types which are known as scalars. So some default scalar type that is already defined by a GraphQL is int for integer, float for floating point, string for character sequence, boolean, and id. Now id scalar type, here you can see it represents a unique identifier. Okay, so we can use this id type for our primary key. Okay, and that's it. Then we have enums, and we have list and non-nulls. So we can represent using this, as we have seen. So there are a lot of things here. You can read once by going to documentation. I just want to show you that these are some of the important default scalar types that GraphQL provides out of the box. So we can use this to create the schema. Now to create the schema, as you can see here, it has created one schema. Or let's come here. It has created one schema using the keyword type, and then various fields are defined and with their own type, right? So we will also define the GraphQL schema like this. So we will say our GraphQL schema name is movie. Now currently we are defining a custom type. Movie is our custom type, so we need to define what fields are there. So first field we have id, which is of the type id, and it is required. Second is of the type title, it is of the type string, and we require this also. Third is of the type director. Okay, director of the movie, so this is again a string. Next is studio, which is again a string. And what else we have? Title id, title, director, studio, release year, and movie cast. Okay, so we can just write release year, and we can just make int it is important. Exclamation marks means it cannot be null basically. Okay, you cannot leave it blank or null. There has to be some value. So release year is mandatory, and of course movie cast. So movie cast is a type of list here, list of string here. Okay, so in GraphQL, to represent a collection of anything, we use brackets and then string. Okay, and it is also mandatory. So this is our GraphQL schema that we have defined. Now next thing that we need to define is, let's first stop this application. We need to query the data. Okay, so to query the data, we need a service class. First, we need to create a service class which will interact with our repository class. Okay, which will interact with the repository layer to get the data from the database. So we will create a movie service and we will annotate it with service. Okay, we will inject the movie repository using the constructor injection. So just write private final movie repository and movie repository, alt enter, add constructor parameter. So we have used constructor injection to inject the movie repository. Now we will create a method, public list of movie. We need all movies. Okay, this is the first method that we are creating. Okay, to get all the data, so we will say get all movies, and we will just return and call our movie repository method. So movie repository dot, it has a method called find all. Now I hopefully am sure that at least you guys have idea about basic CRUD operation or using in the Spring Boot, Hibernate, and using the RESTful APIs. Okay, so that part I have already mentioned in the first video itself, that these are the prerequisites. So you must know these basic methods. It's a part of CRUD operation only. So find all will give all the data. Great, and we need to move this back. Let's create another package and write services. Okay, and just drag and drop here, refactor, and we have moved it to the services package. We need to organize our code in a way so that we know where everything lies where. Okay, next we are going to create a controller. So we need to create a controller in controller class. So controllers dot movie controller. And now when we were developing RESTful applications, we use REST controller annotation, right? But for GraphQL, we have to just use a controller annotation. Since it is simply a GraphQL API, it is not a RESTful API. And then here we need the help of movie service class to get the data, to process the request. So we will use constructor injection again to inject the movie service object. So movie service, alt enter, add constructor parameter, and simply we will create a list of movie and we will say get all movies handler. So basically every method in the controller is a request handler. It gets a request and it handles it by calling the service layer, right? And here we will just return movie service dot get all movies. Now when in the RESTful API we define endpoints /movies or / whatever we need to define, that is we already defined. But in GraphQL we only have one endpoint that is provided by the GraphQL itself. Okay, but it's provided by Spring itself basically. So Spring provides the endpoint /GraphQL. So but then how GraphQL will know that this method is present here? There are two types of queries or two types of way in which we define what type of method it is. So this is a type of, we are querying the data. Okay, so for querying the data we have to use a mapping known as QueryMapping. Okay, so QueryMapping is an annotation which tells the GraphQL that okay, this method is annotated with GraphQL. This method is annotated with QueryMapping. So whenever this method is called, then you have to fetch the request. Okay, so we have annotated this method. Now this method, if we have to tell GraphQL that about this method, then we need to inform it. To inform that way, we have to create another type. So another type name is query. Now this query is not a custom type, it is inbuilt GraphQL. GraphQL provides this type. So inside this type, we write all the methods that are required or that is used for fetching the data. Okay, or you can say for reading the data, because only two types of operations are there in the GraphQL. Either read operation, you just fetch the data and get all your data from the database, or you write the data. In the writing the data, it comes insertion, updating and deletion. Okay, so that is a different topic which we'll explore later. But here in the query type, we use or we will define all the methods that are used for querying the data. So in the movie controller, we just copy this method and the name of the query will be this. Okay, then just put a semicolon and we have to specify the return type, what this method returns. So this method returns this movie, right? Movie object, but a list of movie object. So we will say a list of movie object. Okay, that's it. Since it has no parameters in it, so we don't need to define anything. We don't need to put braces for the parentheses for here. It is fine, right? So now we have defined through annotation, we have defined that this is a method which is used for querying. In the GraphQL, we have specified it that for this method we have to return a movie object, and we have defined the type of movie object, the schema of the movie object. Okay, and this movie object maps to this one. Now all these internal mapping Springboot does itself. Okay, so we don't need to worry about it, that how those mappings will be done between Java object and GraphQL schema. Okay, both will be done by Springboot behind the scene. So this much it is done. Now we are good to fire the query again. So let's start our application again. If everything is okay, then no errors will get. Okay, so there are no errors. Now important thing here is, let's come here. It says GraphQL endpoint HTTP post / GraphQL. So what does it mean? It is stating that there is a GraphQL endpoint which is of the type HTTP post request. Okay, so GraphQL only supports post request, and there is only one endpoint, that is GraphQL, through which we query the data, we write, we insert, delete, update, do everything. Okay, so this is what it means. So our application is up and running, and it has also said loaded one resource in the GraphQL schema. So this means that Spring Boot has taken care of the mapping part that we were discussing, the mapping of schema, GraphQL schema and the Java entity class. Now to do this, one way is to use a post map, but there is another way, and this another way is to use GraphQL. So here you can see that in the application.yml we enabled the GraphQL, right? So we will use this tool. It is a tool specifically made for testing the GraphQL APIs. So just we have to write AT and /GraphQL. So this is the main thing, /GraphQL path equal to /GraphQL. Enter here, you get this. So this is the, you can say, GraphQL query editor where we will fire our queries. So let's remove all these things. You can read it if you want. Now to fire the query. Now we know that if we come to the schema.graphqls, we have defined a type query in which there is a method. So similarly, to fire the query, we first will mention what type we want, what type of querying we are going to do with data, whether we are going to read the data or write the data. So we are going to read the data. So we will write query and brackets. Then we are going to define what methods we are going to use, which method to query the data. So we will write get. It will auto suggest you whatever method you have written in the schema.graphqls file. Okay, then after that you have to, if you hover your mouse over it, then it will show you that it returns a movie object. Okay, we want ID, we want title, we want director, we want studio, we want release year, and we want movie cast. Okay, so these all the fields we want for now. Now we have seen in our database all these fields are right now empty. So what we are going to expect, we should expect a empty list or an empty array. Okay, so let's fire the query. So as you can see, we are getting this. And even if you specify only certain fields, suppose you don't want to get ID, you don't want studio name, release year, you just want title, tractor, and movie cast. So you can also fire this, you'll again get this same result. Okay, now currently we have not included the data in our database, so we are getting the empty result. But in the next video, we will learn about another type of another way of querying the data, or you can say writing the data into the database or inserting the data into the database, and then we will use this query to fetch the data. I hope you have understood everything, and you can add this playlist or save this playlist. More and more videos will be coming up sooner on GraphQL. So I hope you have understood today's all discussion and explanation. That's it all for this video. See you guys next time. Bye bye.